Greetings, everybody. Dave DeWalt here, coming to you live from our NightVision series. This is our second season, episode number 7, almost 30 different NightVision events that we've conducted. I hope you enjoy the sessions that we're doing around influencers and cyber and national security and leaders in the world. And I just want to say thank you for joining us today. I know we have quite a few people online, kind of a sold out show today. So all my guests that's been joining us. If you don't know NightDragon real quick, we're an investment and advisory firm. We focus in on trends and threats that are happening in the world of cybersecurity, national security, national safety areas, wherever the biggest threats and risks are happening in the world or the biggest trends that are happening. We try to bring you some, insights to those markets as an entity and a company. And I can't be more proud today to have Nikesh Arora here from Palo Alto Networks. What an incredible journey he has had and an incredible couple of days, Nikesh, as well. And if I could do just 2 minutes of just your background and then ask you a couple of questions. A lot of people don't know kind of the incredible journey you've personally been on as well. But a man who came from India, obviously immigrated. I feel like an immigrant a little bit too, Nikesh. I came from whole regions of Pennsylvania, which isn't quite the same, but we have a similar path arriving in Silicon Valley. But what an incredible journey. You came, I think, age 22 with a couple $100 in your pocket. You got an education at Northeastern and then over again at Boston College, your master's. You've lived in Europe. You had an incredible journey at Google and a lot of learnings there. You were the president and COO of SoftBank, and just living all over the world, and then ultimately making your decision 4 years ago to join Palo Alto Networks. Can I start off by just asking you, maybe in your own words, to talk a little bit about your journey and kind of what motivated you and what inspired you to go from where you were in India to where you're at today? Pretty cool story.
Well, thank you, Dave. First of all, thank you for having me here. Clearly, you've done this before. You've got the formula down pat, and I loved the video at the beginning, so thank you. We've had a few exciting days, as you can tell. But as they say, you're only as good as your last quarter. So moving on to the next one, I guess. I've been very privileged and blessed to have the journey I've had. And the good news is there is no pattern recognition. Every job I've taken has been different. I never sold ads. I took a job to sell ads at Google in Europe and ended up running half the company for a while. I went to Japan and I worked with Masa because he wanted to have somebody next to him when he was doing all this crazy investing. And there we were, trying to figure out how to go invest in this new age of the internet because he's already done it in the past. And then, he decided that he wanted to do that for 10 more years, and it was a little longer than my time frame to hang around. So I was relaxing at home and taking care of my young kids, and it kind of got boring because they were very young at that time. So Palo Alto came by, said, "Do you want to join the board?" I'm like, "I'll think about it." And it ended up becoming a from the board to run the company conversation in 3 weeks. And lo and behold, I landed at Palo Alto 4 years ago. I was recounting a story to my team earlier today. 2 days after I took the job, I was invited to a Morgan Stanley conference in Utah. And you can see how ignorant I was because I walked in and I saw this tall Indian guy and I Googled him on my phone and he said, "Oh, he went to school at the same school as I did in India 4 years before me." So I walked up to him and said, "Hi, I'm Nikesh Arora. And what does your company do?" It was Jay Chaudhary from Zscaler. And there was a bit of a delight on his face and shock, saying, "Wait, delighted that they've given this job to this guy who has no idea about cybersecurity, doesn't know what we do." And shocked, saying, "How did they give him this job?" So that was my introduction to cybersecurity.
By the way, Nikesh, I love that story, and I've been to Deer Valley many times with Morgan Stanley too. So it's a fun environment. Take me back for a minute, because for a guy who did 17 years as a CEO too, and you're fast approaching those numbers as well. Every decision you make to join a company, it's a big decision, right? I mean, you're at SoftBank, you're the president and COO of SoftBank. That's not exactly a little brand, right? You're working with Masa-san, who we all know is legendary, and you're going to take a job at Palo Alto Networks, which, by the way, is an incredible company.
Well, I left SoftBank at that point in time, so that was done. I'd been home for a year, but that's okay. All right, but keep going. There's still a question.
You have to make a decision. You're probably being pursued by lots of things, and I love Palo Alto Networks, and it was an amazing journey. But, at the time, 4 years ago, a lot of premise hardware, kind of a pretty singular product, amazing product, by the way. Everybody respects that product, and that platform had maybe a couple, I think you call them green shoots in, a couple of areas. But then you go on this incredible transformation journey of acquisitions, building, buying, partnering, changing Palo Alto forever, really. And now I just wanted to read, I just got to say it. This last quarter's results are almost stunning to everybody in the industry. I almost feel like a sell side analyst for a minute, but when I see these numbers, like 2.69 billion in billings, up 44%, first of all, is an incredible number. When you then start to break that down and you look at how much the firewall business is growing, your Strata business still 32% growth, right? It's like, the death of the firewall, which a lot of people say, let's just say that's not true. You grew that business.
The rumors of my death are exaggerated. Yes.
Yeah. 400 million year over year growth on an absolute dollar basis, roughly, just on the firewall business, basically hardware. Then you've grown the next gen ARR by up to $1 billion now plus. It's growing over 60% ARR, 67% on billings. And you had this incredible transformation. It grew 400 million on an absolute dollars basis, $800 million in absolute growth in 1 year, just in dollars. If you compare that to the entire cyber industry, for the most part, 95% of them in aggregate didn't grow that much. Walk me through a little bit. Like, what did you see 4 years ago? And what was your vision here as you come onto this earnings call? Incredible job, by the way. Congratulations. Pretty cool to watch.
Dave, anytime you want to come help me talk about our story, you're welcome. You did such a great job. I feel like I should be taking lessons from you on how to go highlight all this cool stuff. Look, it's kind of interesting. I think the fact that I had never done enterprise or cybersecurity was both a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing is like, I could bring a fresh pair of eyes. And I think the way the board, to give them credit, said, at that time we had 5,000 employees. They said, you have 5,000 cybersecurity experts. We need some people who don't do cybersecurity for a living, and you'd be fine. And I looked at the industry, and we're probably one of 7 players at the market of similar size, give or take. But I looked at it and said, look, there's an opportunity for a company to get to be a leader in this industry if some plan was executed. Now, what are the precursors to it? The precursor we were good in our firewall business. We were a leader in that firewall space. We've been a leader for 6 years in the Magic Quadrant, which is the holy Bible in this industry, I guess. And we were generating free cash. And cash is good because you can spend cash to do things. It's very hard if you're not making money and not growing too fast and you're a suboptimal market cap. But he said, you have a great product category, people trust your brand, they like you have a lot of cash, what can you do with it? I think that was kind of the simple premise. And having spent 10 years watching Google and spending a lot of time and listening to Larry Page and Eric Schmidt run that company, it was ingrained in me at the end of the day, technology companies fail once their products become irrelevant. And I think it sounds so simple, but if you look at the history of Silicon Valley, history of tech, you can trace every tech company's market cap to the quality and their persistence of their product. And when the leadership stops paying attention to the product and the product decays, you have a lag, but eventually customers leave and go somewhere else. Now, armed with that insight, I looked at our product portfolio. So that was one insight. The other insight was, in cybersecurity, I think it's one of the most innovative industries in the world because you have 2,000 companies getting funded every year. There's no other subsector in technology where this happens. So clearly there's innovation. The problem is most of the leaders are fat and lazy. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's just that you're so busy selling the last thing you build that you forget that there's a new thing being built. So we had technical debt to pay. We didn't have enough innovation internally because we hadn't put in the effort and the resources to go do that. So we said, look, we can't undo the past. We can't go fix all the deployed infrastructure in the world, but what we can fix is the future.
Yep.
So we had a future conversation and, we said the cloud is going to be big. It's like our plastics moment. Cloud is going to be big, right? Well, what do you need in cloud? Sorry?
If I could interject for just a second,
Please.
I'm amazed. Well, I want to ask you a question, because the two halves of your business, and I know you have 3 product lines, but I think about 2 halves of your business here. The half that was a bit legacy, which is kind of core firewall. I want to ask you for a minute, because I think there's some trends in my mind, with people coming back to work, sort of this perimeter was dead kind of feeling. But I mean, growing this thing 400 million absolute dollar, 32%, $1.6 billion business coming off that. And your network security now having this incredibly flexible architecture, meaning you can do prem, you can do cloud components to it, you can have a SASE element to it. You created almost this next gen network security capability that's almost what seems to me like right on with where post pandemic we're going. I mean, do you see that? And why is that business growing so much when we think it should be going the other way?
So that's phenomenal insight, Dave. As I said, you can come and help me anytime you want, because if you think what happened, right? If you just armed with that fundamental insight that cloud's going to be big, add to that the conversation that was prevalent 4 to 5 years ago, all around AI and data, right? That conversation started 4 or 5 years ago. It was AI and robotics, and that's when C3.ai got started. A bunch of people started talking about AI, and you sat there and say, security is the perfect place to implement AI, because you're trying to stop the unknown, right? How do you do it? You do it by being able to stop it based on pattern recognition, based on stuff that you haven't seen, based on anomalous detection. You got to do it across an enterprise where there's billions of bits and bytes moving across your data streams. So those are only literally, those are my 2 insights. I drive to work in the morning, I talk to Nir, I drive back home, I talked to Lee for an hour. Nir's our founder, CTO, Lee's our chief product officer. Nir would give me insight about the industry. I'd learn a whole bunch of shit in the day. Lee would disambiguate it for me in the evening. That was my lesson. I did that for almost a year. And in the first year, I saw 250 cybersecurity companies.
You saw
I bring them in.
Met with them, yeah.
Sorry?
Learn. You met with them to learn.
Well, to understand what's going on in the industry. The good news is, God bless their soul, they want to talk to me. They want to tell me what they're doing, because there's a possibility we'd want them. And I learned my cybersecurity in the first year at Palo Alto Networks, 2 years, and I learned all product. That's all I did. I did product with Lee. That's what we did. I'm like, what about this? 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 And we spent that time understanding what's happening in the market, where the puck was going. And we said, okay, this cloud security thing is interesting. And you know what? At that time, it wasn't obvious. It was the whole world thought CASB was cloud security. You remember, there was Symantec had bought somebody, McAfee had bought somebody, Netscope started as a CASB company. And we're sitting there saying, I'm like, I have a math problem. And Lee's like, what's the math problem? The math problem says 80% of the apps in the world are custom built by enterprises. 20% are platformable, like Workday, Salesforce, you pick it. Why do we believe that 20% is more important than 80%? I said, well, 80% will be taken care of by Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. They'll build the tooling for everything you put in the public cloud. I'm like, that's a 2%, 4% business for them. They're in the business of getting the 100% of getting us to go to the cloud. Why would they spend so much time and attention on building security? That was our insight. Yeah. So we went the other way in cloud security. So, well, we'll go build cloud security in multi-cloud, and we'll put our bet over there. And this is where we bought 6 or 7 companies in the cloud security space, stitched the platform into Prisma Cloud. Next insight was, if half my traffic is going to the cloud, my network architecture has to change. And this was our kind of, you brought up, why is network security growing? Because you know what? Every customer in the next 10 years is going to have to rewire and reconfigure their network architecture.
It's the underpinning, it's the foundation, right? Absolutely. And now with work from everywhere, work from anywhere, you have this architecture that has to be incredibly flexible to be able to do it. I mean, now you have $1 billion business, Nikesh, or more just in cloud, right? You've been in, build that, it's a 60% grower. I mean, which is incredible. I think no one's been able to quite get to that level that fast.
Well, I mean, look, our next generation security, we told people, which is basically all the new stuff in the last 4 years, hit 1.9 billion in ARR in 4 years from zero.
Right.
I think if that was an independent company, it'd probably be worth more than Palo Alto.
It might be, yeah. with today's revenue multiples, right? Can I ask you a question? I want to ask you a soft question for a second. You think about this 4-year journey and, having been a guy in the CEO seat a lot, and I think about leadership and qualities. You just talked a lot about innovation, right? Seeing the future, not the past, right? I mean, what about like other elements? I mean, do you try to build like a customer first culture, an employee first culture, a winning culture? Like, how do you describe like how you're trying to create a cultural thing at Palo Alto Networks? Because the X factor of people believing, and when employees believe, great things happen. And clearly great things are happening at Palo Alto Networks right now. So talk about leadership and qualities like that for a minute that you see.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting you talk about that, because I'll tell you that in all my jobs, because I wasn't fully CEO, we were relying on whether it was Larry Page or Eric Schmidt. So they wrote the culture book at Google, or Masa wrote the culture book because he was the CEO. And so this was my first opportunity to write that culture book. And it was an interesting journey. I think that has been the biggest self-development opportunity that I've been able to have in the last 4 years. And I'm glad I landed where I landed. I think the pandemic was the catalyst to some degree, because I did some before that, but I flipped at the pandemic. And I'll give you a very live example of today in a second. But what I did, the first thing I did was I actually polled our employees, 5,600 of them when I came, and said, we sent them a culture questionnaire. And I got 11,000 comments, and I read them all. And then me and Leanne, my head of HR, sat down and abstracted from that what people were telling us, and we derived our cultural values based on what people said. And they were around collaboration, disruption, inclusion, customer, and all that stuff. And we basically replayed back to our employees, this is what you're saying our cultural values are, and we agree this is what the company needs to stand for. But in there, I think you said something very insightful earlier. We put employees at the center of it, and really the pandemic did that. I was the first person in the industry to come out and say nobody will lose their job at Palo Alto Networks, even if that hurts our margins. Because in times of uncertainty, people want certainty. In times of vacuum of leadership in the nation, people want leadership in their companies. So that was kind of like my aha moment. And I said, look, happiest employees do the best work for companies. And if you can keep your employees happy and tell them that you care, they'll do the best work. But you just can't say it, you got to walk the talk. So I'll tell you, since the pandemic, I host every week, once or twice, 30 employees in the company on Zoom. I just did that this morning at 8:30. I do it in the midst of earnings. I do it in the midst of anything. It's sacred. I spend time with 30 or 40 of my team in the company, and it's free for all. You can tell me anything. You can talk to me. I must have gone through 4,000 or 5,000 employees in the last 3 years. And it's amazing. The stories you hear, amazing the bonds you create, amazing the motivation that it creates for the employees.
Nikesh, I mean, I love the communications. I tried really hard as a CEO to communicate at every level, all the way down to the security guard waiting for you when you walked in, to everything up. And, credit to you on all that. I think that's incredibly powerful. How do you think about talent right now? Because, I mean, wow. I mean, it's like 4 million cybersecurity jobs out there available and job openings, and you've got to continue to build leadership and grow and talent. Are you looking at this from a work from anywhere? Are you trying to centralize people to work? Are you picking domains around the world to kind of create epicenter? Like, how are you thinking about talent as a strategy for Palo Alto Networks?
That's a great question, Dave. I think let me break that out into 3 parts. First part, we have a reasonably flexible work policy. You can work from pretty much wherever you'd like, but slowly and steadily, we're also encouraging you to spend time with your colleagues. Because the flip side of it is you're seeing studies tell you that there's people suffering from loneliness. They don't want to be sitting in their homes all the time. They crave attention, they crave interaction. And if you spend 8 hours a day with people on Zoom, that's your best opportunity to find a way to interact with them personally, because you're spending so much time with them. So there is a bit of a balance needed, and people need to self-elect that. We're not going to mandate that, because there's no point mandating it. I think the biggest flip, and we launched this coalition with Uber, Splunk, Zoom, a bunch of other companies joined us. The whole work week was actually designed in the factory. You had to show up in the morning, punch your card, and sit in your spot, because when the assembly line turned on, you were missing from your seat. Some widget was going to be not prepared. So everybody had to show up at the same time, sit in your space, and do that stuff. And the moment you had to leave, the assembly line came down. And that's been the work culture for a few hundred years. And we never challenged it. We asked people to come to work at 8:30 in the morning and go home at 6. Doesn't matter if you're a night owl, you're an early bird, it didn't matter. That was defined in the factory. We flipped it. We said employee, it's not employer choice, it's employee choice. We want output, we want outcome. We don't want to tell you when and how to get your shit done. So I think, living with that philosophy, like, it's up to you, but we're just giving you recommendations. If you don't interact with people, you're not going to like it. You're not going to probably do a great job. So we recommend people work with each other, but we don't mandate it. That's kind of one thing. The only point I'd like to make on your 4 million jobs, and I'll stop there, is like, I think that's the wrong problem. And we talked about the future. I think that's the wrong problem. What I mean by that is, think about how security is designed today. Security is designed to give our customers a Swiss Army knife. We tell them, here's all the things you can do with my product. You can tweak this, and it'll give you an alert if you don't like this, you get an alert if you don't like this. And when you get an alert, you should decide what you want to do with it. I don't know your business. Our customers are dying in alerts created by products that we've built, you've built, I've built. They're dying in alerts. They don't know. They don't know. Our products have become too complicated as an industry. The customer doesn't know what was meant to be. So get more trained people because they'll figure out how to solve the problem. We don't need that. It's the complexity we're creating that is causing the need for these trained people. We need to flip it on its head. We need to start understanding data and analyzing it. We need more platform integration. We need our products to talk to other products. And the problem is, the reason we never make our products talk to each other is because they talk to your products in any one of your companies. The bad actors can have them talk to their products too. So, I'm sorry to talk my book, but that's why we went for cross product integration.
Yeah. And you led that, by the way. Yeah, absolutely. Great.
And I was told no customer wants to do it, but they're realizing, if my firewall is not talking to my endpoint, I'm getting 2 sets of alerts and they're overlapping, but I don't know how to disambiguate because it's so complicated. So yes, I think we need to find more cybersecurity talent, but I think AI, data analytics, integration, best of breed integration is the solution. I don't think just more people is solving the problem.
By the way, just a shout out to you and your company for supporting us. NightDragon, we put together a lot of cyber talent kind of programs, philanthropic programs to get young people educated in cyber, and you guys donated and helped. I just want to say thank you. Hey, I want to transition. I want to ask you a macro question or two.
Sure.
Because, for a guy who's been in this for 20 years, I've watched a series of trends, and I kind of call it this little pendulum of like best of breed to best of suite. And depending on the threat environment, sometimes the best of breed pops up. And I felt that with FireEye in my days running there, where like these APTs were coming at us. It was a new threat, and I was able to build a company from damn near zero to $1 billion in revenue in a quick period of time because I solved a threat problem. And it was like a best of breed moment. My days of McAfee, even further, it was kind of a best of suite game because we'd add things to the endpoint, off we go. Today now, going forward, it looks like an incredible window because we have 2 or 3, 4 companies maybe emerging out of the cyber pack as like titans. And I look at Palo Alto Networks as leading that, right? I mean, $50+ billion market cap, on your way to $100 billion. I saw Morgan Stanley say it. I said 4 years ago.
Must be true. If they said it, must be true, right?
I believe it. 4 years ago, I said someone's going to hit 100 billion. Who's it going to be? And you can say CrowdStrike's doing well, Zscaler's doing well. You could argue Fortinet's $40 billion market cap. I mean, there's a few emerging out of the 7,000 cyber as titans. But then on the other side of the titans is what I call, the hyperscalers are coming too, right? So yeah. Microsoft, recently said, I got a $15 billion revenue business in security. I believe them, I guess. Yeah, pretty close. Google's acquiring Mandiant. They're, doing things. And Amazon.
You must know something about that.
I know a little bit. Yes. But what's fascinating to me is now watching the next 1 or couple years where like Palo Alto, CrowdStrike now have to face a new adversary in the form of a Microsoft, a Google, where co-opetition becomes a whole new game too. How do you look at I hate to call it the clash of the titans here coming, but like it's a little bit of that, and they're going to spend a lot of money buying and building themselves like Microsoft is doing and like Google's doing and you're doing. mean, do you see that playing field where, suddenly we're going to have a race of 6 or 7 companies all in the billions of revenue, or do you see it still like thousands? Like, how do you see it?
It's funny you say that, because this morning I just came from our go-to-market leadership kickoff for the next year, and somebody asked me a very similar question about competition. And I don't see half the companies you talked about as potential competitors. And not because, no, I don't. Not because they're not worthy, and not because they're not capable and they're not doing well. They're all doing well in the swim lanes that we've all established for ourselves, and they're doing better. I believe the future of cybersecurity is going to be very different than the current paradigm that exists. And we embarked on this journey 4 years ago where we kept talking about integration. We kept talking about integration. People told me I was full of whatever. I didn't know the industry. Customers don't want integration. They want best of breed. And I said, yeah, they've never seen best of breed being integrated.
Right.
So, just as a fact point, when I came, we were in one magic quadrant to the right, the firewall one. We're in 11 right now, Dave. No cybersecurity company has been in 11 magic quadrants to the right ever. And now our customer says, okay, great. If you can make those 4 things talk to each other, I'll buy it. I want to get to 16. I want to get to 20. So that's the way I think about it. I think about great products that talk to each other, that solve your security problem, get you a better security posture. Anybody who can do that is going to become a titan. I don't have enough insight that there are 6 players out there following that approach for the customers, because over time, I think we will see consolidation, because that's the only way to solve the problem. I'll tell you, the biggest rude awakening to our customers is when something happens, they come in and they understand how to solve the problem, and we're soup to nuts end-to-end Palo Alto, right? You couldn't be end-to-end Palo Alto 4 years ago. You can be. We can cover 80% of your security needs at identity. We can get there. So our aspiration is to keep building great products. I'll give you an example, back to the cloud conversation. We realized cloud security is going to be important. We bought 6 companies. Now we can run the entire, build, deploy, run stack. We can run the run stack. We can give you full visibility and full tracking over there. We bought Bridgecrew because we were not in the build game. We got to be in the build game. We got to be in the build and deploy and run game. So we're trying to give the integrated platform to the customers so they don't have to go chase different solutions. Now, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it's a $180 billion industry, right? You pick a number. I keep hearing different numbers, 120, 140, 180, 200, whatever the number is. I got 3% share.
Right. Which is, in the grand scheme of things.
I had 1.3 4 years ago, Dave. You give me 20, I'll be perfectly happy to be one of 5 titans. You give me 15, I'm okay. That's still 5x from here.
And by the way, if I could interject for a minute, I think people don't realize, and for a guy who studies all the tangential markets that call it around cyber, yep, cyber's in the, call it 120, 180, billion, 100 billion space, right? It's massive, but you start putting all the little dots around it. Like, over here's crypto, over here's supply chain, here's industrial security, here's areas like shifting left developer, and there's 100 billion markets bigger. We think it's over 400 billion. A bigger TAM that you
I couldn't say it better, Dave. I mean, look at SASE, right? SASE is actually a networking TAM shifting to security, right? We sell networking and security together because it makes sense, but you're shifting the MPLS business, the SD-WAN business from networking into SASE because it needs to be secured. So you're right. There are tangential businesses which should be connected to security and shouldn't be sold separately, because I'm sure you say this to your multiple, 20 odd companies on the board of, that you got to build security in on day one. Yep. So is it a security product or a networking product, or a development tool or a DevSecOps tool?
So you're really back to 1.3% market share if it's a $400 billion.
Yeah, I was told when I was growing up, you have a lot of potential. You just have to exercise it. So there I am, back to 1.3%.
How do you think about, Nikesh, there's some emerging markets. I'd like to ask you a little bit about, there's some ones that are coming on, and I'd be curious, how do you think about them? I think about OT security right now. I'm involved with a couple of them. Some of them are catching some momentum.
Why am I not surprised?
But for the first time, you're seeing a crossing the chasm. 100 million ARR companies, they're coming. Dragos, Clarity, people like that. clearly there's a massive TAM coming on the other side of the IP network called the OT ICS network.
Yeah.
That's an interesting space where, quite honestly, Palo Alto already has some roots in it, just with your firewalls, air gapping and managing and segmenting between them. I mean, how do you see that market? Is that something that you're also seeing as a trend of growth?
So that's a great question. Like, I think the way I think about IoT and OT is, I think over time, IoT needs to be at every company, right? We have 17,000 devices of IoT type hanging off our network somewhere at Palo Alto. We don't know every one of them. We don't know the device type. We don't know what he actually does. We know it's not a traditional endpoint that we're used to. They need to be segmented. They need to be protected. They need to be classified. They need to be understood so that they don't do something to disrupt your day-to-day business. And people can stick them on the end of Ethernet ports and we don't know what they're doing, right? So there's IoT is needed for every company. We've taken that approach. We've built IoT into our firewall capability. You don't have to put new sensors. We can do that. But the moment you get past the generic enterprise need for IoT, like you said, there are specialist categories which are way more involved and mission critical, like OT, right? Like critical infrastructure, like manufacturing or healthcare. Everybody has a series of devices which are complex, expensive, and can impact business or life. And you need security for those because, as you know, we're as strong as our weakest link. And if I can stop a cardiac knife mid-operation, people die.
Right.
Or if I can do something to an electric substation, bad stuff happen. So you need that OT security. It's a complex problem because now you're dealing with a lot of devices which are never designed to be connected to the internet. Right.
And by the way, a lot of people don't realize, there's 3 to 5 times more devices than people connected to your networks, right? And for the most part, that's a real market opportunity for someone like yourself downstream again, just because it's not tapped yet.
But Dave, when people don't realize that, I tell them just a pop quiz. How many devices are in your house and how many people?
Right. I have 6 of them right in front of me. So
there we go. So, when you go home, I'm sure you got more shit hanging off your network. I'm glad most people can't see how many devices hang off their routers that have a hissy fit.
How do you feel about, you mentioned Bridge Crew, because I thought that was very insightful acquisition personally. A lot of people like, oh, what was Bridge Crew? What's it doing? And, this open source scanner and this shift left to the build side. And, boy, do I believe that the developers taking center stage coming right in the world of security. The more we can bake in from design and develop phase, the more you have a SecOps opportunity later, especially with all your Cortex capabilities and downstream. Yep. Do you see that as a big inertia for you? Like, I got to go build, buy in that area? Like, how do you feel about that segment?
So, like, it's an interesting, I'll say 2 things there. When I started the acquisition strategy about 4 years ago, I think the first set of reactions was people were perplexed. And the street thought, here's this guy, he doesn't understand cybersecurity, and he's busy spending the $4 billion of cash they have. We knew why this was a bad idea to hire this guy. And in about an 18 months time frame, 24 months time frame, we reached a tipping point where I have a chart. I can show you when we buy a company now in a category, we see 3 or 4 follow-on actions by other companies. When we bought Redlock, one of our competitors bought a security company in the same space. When we bought Expanse, we've seen people buy attack surface management. So we bought a bunch of stuff. People go find something in the category. So the good news is, clearly we must know something or we must be doing something that people want to follow. Now, on the Bridge Crew front, and I think the big insight there is some industry commentators believe that developer security is going to be developer-led. And my view, it might be controversial, is at the end of the day, even developer security needs to be consistent around the organization. You can't have 7 different open source tools you're using for security because, first of all, open source and security don't go together in the same sentence.
Right.
Because if open source by default, you have no idea where it came from, who built it, and you're using it to create security, it just doesn't make sense, right? which would mean if I'm a bad actor, I should be dropping a whole bunch of open source tools out there because then I have control of your supply chain. So you have to have a verified strategy on the developer side, which has to come from somebody who understands enterprise security, which is kind of an oxymoron because enterprise security guys don't understand developers. So Bridge Crew was our attempt to understand developers, yet figure out a way of connecting that to an enterprise security strategy. So I think that's extremely strategic for us. And Dave, we said this yesterday, is our fastest adopted module in our cloud security platform.
Yeah, I figured that was the case. I could see your ability to shift left a little bit is just greenfield for you, right?
Yes.
Because everything else you have, that would be a very fast grower for sure. Let me ask you this question, if I could. It's an interesting macro question for you for a second, because you have such a big footprint now that you see threats at another level. I saw them with FireEye Mandate clearly. I had a bird's eye view to a bunch. I see some stuff. This last 2 years with the pandemic and all the resulting crises, now Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, how do you think about the threat environment? And the reason I say this is because in the world of cyber for the last 20 years, I always called it these super cycles, which is whenever we saw an elevated threat environment, what happened right behind it? Elevated customer spend environment. What you see right behind that? An elevated investor environment. And we probably have, at least by most metrics, the highest elevated threat environment of all time, which is showing us that we're probably going to see an even higher elevated customer spend, a higher elevated investor spend. And that's going on. Do you see that from Palo Alto and your Unit 42 and the work that you're doing there? I mean, how do you see the threat environment today?
So I'm going to flip that question back to you in a second, Dave, and I'll tell you, I think it's different this time. And the way it's different, I think since the time you've watched it for the last 20 years in your career, longer in cybersecurity, I think the biggest inflection that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, it's gone from a hobby to a profession. See, cyber activity was kids trying to prove they can hack stuff. There were hackers or people trying to prove that they can get into large companies. But now people realize there's economic value to be had. There's competitive advantage to be had. There's IP to be had. Nation states can disrupt other nation states. So I think it's gone into a profession. You can actually get a job, in companies or in good and bad organizations and do so for a living. I think that's a fundamental shift, which I think takes you away from a super cycle to this becoming the norm. And I think, so to your point, I don't think this is going to go away. I think this is the norm. I think you're going to see more and more cyber activity, more and more cyber attacks. Because I'll tell you, and you know this better than I do, I don't want to be like, the doomsayer, but there's a lot of holes in every IT infrastructure because they were never designed to be fully secure. And we're just going through that journey as a world, as an industry, as a sector, figuring out how to create more security for our customers. I mean, you know this and I know this, that, what is Warren Buffett's quote? If a cop follows me for 500 miles, they'll stop me for something. So if a lot of people focus on an organization, they'll figure out a way to get in. That's not a happy thought. But some are a lot easier because they're doing self goals. You got to start by fixing the self goals. We got to take it to a point where people feel secure. We got to take it to a point to be advanced. But I think that's a journey that every organization needs to go through. And I think there's, economically, that means phenomenal amount of potential for our industry, for our sector, and all those 20 companies you're on the board of.
Yeah, it's interesting timing. I look at this window as we come into the back half of 2022. The days of companies being where 5 and 10 million of ARR, having billion-dollar unicorns is probably done for a while. Even in cyber, which is an incredibly anti-cyclic kind of space, to your point, right? It's just up and to the right, threat environment, spend environment. I truly believe that, and that's for our lifetimes. But there's an interesting contraction of valuation that's trickled from public to private, all the way to early stage now, creating an even bigger opportunity potentially for the likes of your company and others to consolidate even more this opportunity, either through your own organic consolidation you're currently doing, or inorganic as well, or combinations of the two. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting years in cyber's history, potentially from an M&A point of view, just because of the down rounds, the lack of cash and capital potentially there for companies, and maybe a big opportunity for you.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things interesting, Dave, if you look at the breakout businesses in the last 10 years, companies that have come from startup land and become large cybersecurity companies, there's been two models, right? There's been the great product model, Palo Alto Networks. I don't think they took a lot of funding. I can go back and say, you were there, this stuff, or, FireEye and Manus, all the world. It was a resource constrained model. So you had to have really good product and get customers convinced to go get your product. The last few years, we've seen the brute force go-to-market model with good product, where you burned rubber and ran as fast as you could and go to market, and profitability wasn't the goal. The goal was to get more adoption and customers, and because capital was cheap, people have been pumping capital into that machine, and eventually they come out the other side, turning profitable and cash flow positive. But they lived in negative cash flow for a long time, but the market was willing to give you money because it's much better to give you money than get 0% in the bank. The moment the risk appetite is gone, money's expensive, I think we're going to have to go back to the way Palo Alto was created from a startup scenario to the way perhaps the next two or three, and I don't want to pick names because and it's not about them, it's about the market. And the market was more generous, and you saw some of that. I think there's the last 2 years, you saw some of that happen in the startup space. Companies raising money at $1 billion, $6 billion, $8 billion with ARRs that hadn't crossed $1 billion, or ARRs that hadn't crossed a few $100 million. I think those days are over. I think to your point, it means you'd be better damn sure you've got a great product, and you better have the ability to build a full product suite as opposed to a feature. My problem is a lot of the startups out there are feature startups, and those features are not going to get funded to get to scale.
Yeah. By the way, I agree. I think this window for you is incredible. I think this opportunity where, we don't see, the potential for these companies that get liquid in public markets or do things is just going to slow them down and create greater strength for you as you go through your next 1 year. So,
Yeah, I don't, yes, it's probably true, but that's not how I think about it. I mean, the way I think about it is I think security architectures need more than incremental features. I think they need a bit of an overhaul. And I think most serious security enterprises are going to go into a re-architecture and overhaul mode in the next decade. Whether you look at all the SASE network security, it's a network security overhaul. It's not features SASE. SASE is a comprehensive platform strategy. You need DLP, SD-WAN, you need IoT in there, you need threat prevention, you need sandboxing, you name it, CASB, you need the whole suite. That's not child's play. That's not going to be a startup who's going to create 10 modules and be able to give you a 99.9% SLAs on SASE. That is going to be the realm of bigger players. So you can go build remote browser isolation. It's a feature. You can tack it onto any of these platforms, and over time, these platforms will absorb that feature. Just the way, IPS and IDS were thrown out by Palo Alto when we built the firewall. Until then, they were feature industries. All I'm saying is that the time for feature industries is gone. They're going to be around, but they're going to be an arbitrage because eventually that capability will be subsumed by some of the larger players. And yeah, can you make money in arbitrage? You can.
I'm smiling a little bit because you said something at the beginning about, you were a guy who didn't know cyber. And I'm listening to you now. It's like music to my ears because like every acronym you can speak in cyber, you've got like right down, it. I mean, and deeply it, and you're invested in it, and you can feel that energy from you in a positive way, and the gentleman that you are in a lot of ways. I always say this, like, I don't know if you ever heard me talk, but I talk about these 4 H's all the time: humility, hard work, honesty, and hunger. If you have those as a CEO and you can keep your feet on the ground with humility of your success, you can keep honest with yourself and your employees, and you can keep that hard work attitude and that hunger and ambition, you're unstoppable. And
I'm going to steal that, Dave. That's a great framework to think about it. Now, I told you, as before we started this, I am at my most paranoid right now after our quarterly results, because the expectations are high from our customers, our employees, our investors. The numbers are getting bigger, and bigger numbers are hard to grow fast, and it takes longer. Generally, we're lucky, or partly lucky and partly good, hopefully, that we bet on 3 businesses, and I've said this to our public investors, and I can say it again here. is we built Prisma SASE, Prisma Cloud, Cortex 3 years ago. I have line of sight in the next 18 to 24 months, all three of them will be billion-dollar businesses in billings. I don't think there's a cybersecurity company which has gone into three new businesses which are relevant with large TAMs and built simultaneously $3 billion business whilst growing our core business in 15 to 20% range, which is also a $4 to $5 billion business. So I'm paranoid. How do we keep that momentum? How do we keep that growth? And where's the next few billion-dollar business going to come from? So I'm busy thinking about, what takes off 3 years from now. So I need to make sure I got people working on it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go out and buy more stuff.
By the way, a lot of people don't know this. Maybe obviously insiders do, but you've built one hell of a team. And I always felt like one of the greatest CEO skills, chairman CEO skills in your case, is surround yourself with people better than yourself, and you'll do great things. And I think the world of BJ Jenkins, I think the world of your Lee and Nir, I love to death. Like you surrounded yourself with incredible people, and it's a tribute to you.
Well, the good news is that, and I'm just repeating what I hear from we've acquired 14 companies so far, which are deployed. Majority of the founders still work for us, and they do it because they love it. They're all past their vesting periods on their big equity that they got when we bought their companies. They are now working as regular part of Palo Alto Networks. And, that's inspiring for all the other people because they see that our agility and disruptive desires and innovative desires are consistent with what they left for when they worked at other large companies. And they still come and tell me that they still feel that agility, that hunger, that paranoia that they used to feel as a startup founder is just much better because they can work for a leader. Because it takes away the need to have to beg customers and to try their product. It's like we go in as the guys who have the solution, and people like that. No, you don't know Helmut Reisinger. We hired him he was CEO of Orange Business Services in Europe. He runs our European business. He's the next CEO. Of course, BJ used to run Barracuda. So I'm lazy. So that hardworking part is going to be a question. I'm lazy. I don't want to do the same thing again and again. So I always try and find people who are better than me at that. And they love that job. They get full autonomy. They go do a great job, and I can go do something else.
By the way, it's a tribute. I found it hard during my days at McAfee to build and integrate what I think of as an R&D culture of innovation together with, I called it an A&I, acquisition and integration culture, and infuse those together. You've done that, right? These founders are still there. You can acquire and innovate and integrate and keep that build and buy kind of thing together in one. So last question for you.
A lot of string, a lot of Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. What are you looking forward to in the next, 1 year? I mean, what, you have a pretty interesting horizon. You've given out guidance. You've got a lot going on. I mean, is there something that you're like, I'm looking forward to this, or, can't say?
Dave, imagine, and I'm going to take you back as a parting comment. I walked in June. We did our first analyst day in September because the street wanted to know what I was going to do. We put out a plan. 3 months in, I put out a plan. I said, we're going to do $1 billion in next generation security in 3 years. We're going to build a cloud security business. We're going to build a network security business of new, and we're going to build Cortex. And this was the emperor who had no clothes, right? We didn't have any acquisitions done. We bought one company. We didn't know if we could build a product. We didn't know if we could build product market fit. We didn't know if we could sell it. I had a firewall sales team. And we put out a 3-year plan. And we beat it by a mile. I did another one last year. And I put out another 3-year plan. And I said, we're going to turn these things into larger businesses. We'll hit bigger numbers, blah, blah, blah. And the good news was, this time I knew the products. I had product market fit. I had to tweak the system to scale. So I think we have a robust product portfolio as Palo Alto Networks. We have a great culture. We have phenomenal employees who come to work excited, motivated to go win. And I think it's our execution that's going to make a difference and get us to that $100 billion number that you articulated. And I'll tell you, the next 3 years, I'm looking forward to this turning into a cybersecurity execution machine and really partnering with our customers and everybody in the industry.
Nikesh Arora, I just want to say thank you. It's an honor to have this little fireside chat with you. You're inspirational, you're motivating. And I promise I won't go back and do another CEO job. But every time I talk to you, I'm like, oh my God, I want to go do it again. But I'll tell
Hey,
you,
no, you on, Dave?
I'm really, really appreciative. And by the way, just congratulations. I mean, a man who said what he was going to go do, then did it, and then did it even more. And the humility and the hard work you have, and the gentleman you are, I can't effusively say enough. For everybody's listening, we'll see this in the future. I wish you all the best of luck, sincerely from my heart. And thank you for coming on NightDragon show. And I hope to see you around at another event, hopefully soon.
No, Dave, I also want to thank you and congratulate you for your dedication and leadership to the industry. You're an inspiration for a lot of startup founders out there. You're an inspiration to a lot of cybersecurity leaders out there. So thank you for everything you've done for the industry.
I'll send you the 212 text messages I got during this call want me to ask you questions. I'm just joking, but I have gotten a lot. Thank you for coming on the show, Nikesh. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you around.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, bye-bye now.